Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited for my conversation today with Jessica Dawson. She is the founder of Empowered for Sales. She is a sales coach and a business strategist for entrepreneurs and executives. Jessica helps those that are selling their vision in the boardroom or selling their way to six figures. She works with folks on both ends of the spectrum. Welcome to the show today, Jessica.
Hello, Felina. So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to share your story, which I know you're originally an East Coast girl. You're from Jersey. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, that's so well said, Felina. And I often will call myself a Jersey girl still, even though I live in the Midwest. I live here in Chicago, but my East Coast roots run deep. So yes.
Absolutely, as they should. And I'm very proud. Awesome. I love that. And it looks like, Jessica, you stayed on the East Coast for college. You went to college in Atlanta?
I did. I attended Spelman College, which is an HBCU, all women's college, and, a little bit of a legacy there because my dad went to Morehouse and so did my brothers. So very proud moment being able to attend that historically Black college for sure.
That's awesome. And you majored in econ.
Yes, economics major. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And why did you choose that major?
Oh, such a good question. So I grew up really close to Manhattan. And during that time, the definition of success was definitely to go on Wall Street. And I also had my dad was an investment banker before retiring. And so I always had this idea in my mind, especially going to all of the bring your daughters to work days. So some people listening to that may be familiar with that, but that to be successful meant being on Wall Street in a high-powered suit, high-powered job. And there was not a business major at Spelman, so I chose economics because it was the closest thing to get me to that vision.
I love it. Well, I'm a closet economist myself, or like I pretend to be an economist, more on the social economic side of things. So, so we'll have to dive into that sometime.
Totally would love that conversation.
I love it. Awesome. Okay, so you graduate. What's your first job out of school?
I was a financial advisor working for American Express. So I immediately dove into this 100% commission role out of college. And you eat what you kill, essentially. And it was a commission draw role, taught me so much about how emotional people can be about their money. Yeah. And also it got me my sales chops because I remember I was doing 100 dials a day, cold calling, trying to get people in the door. And I ended up, growing a portfolio pretty large in my first year. I got 15 clients, and but it was definitely a pavement pounding role for sure.
I'm sure you bring some of that experience into your business. Did you stay in sales?
Yeah, great question. So, in my opinion, we're selling all the time,
true.
Right? And, going from that role, I actually, after that role, I transitioned to Lehman Brothers, which is such an interesting story. I was working for Neuberger Berman, the last asset that Lehman had within the bankruptcy filing. But I remember in 2008 trying to retain client assets and getting called a lot of names. And as the company was collapsing, so it wasn't 100% sales commission like that financial advisor job, more so being on the phones to help people with their portfolios. So I would have to upsell or get people interested in different mutual funds or other types of accounts. So yes, I was still selling, just in a different capacity.
Wow, that must have been an interesting time to be at Lehman Brothers. My goodness, I can't imagine what you experienced.
Yeah, it's like one of those experiences, in your life, you have these moments that stay with you for your whole life. That day, I still remember it very vividly because it was unprecedented throughout the world, throughout the industry. But it was actually a really great defining moment because it was the catalyst that propelled me into my work that I'm very passionate about today, actually. And it was the brokenness just from that experience with Neuberger Berman. They brought themselves back when we went through 8 rounds of layoffs. And it was the first time that I really understood that it wasn't just me who was kind of miserable in my job. I didn't really like my job, to be quite honest. But it was the first time that I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who doesn't like my job. The organization, it was an awful time. So the organization, they did what they could. However, I just thought that there had to be a better way to cultivate talent, to build talent, to retain talent, so that was kind of the spark that got me interested in making organizations a better place to work.
Awesome. And I want to kind of touch on, you went back to school too during this period of time, and what sparked that?
Yeah, so going back to school was actually, it was sparked because I really wanted to get into HR. And because that was like my answer. I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way for organizations. What a lot of times helps with cultures and organizations, it's HR. So I went back to school to get my MBA. And the reason for that is because I saw myself working at like a GE or a Johnson and Johnson and their HR leadership program. And I wanted to do like strategic HR initiatives. So that was the spark. And I figured to make a career pivot, the easiest way to do that is to go back to school, kind of take a step back, redefine. So I'm in this process of redefining what success is. I no longer think that it's, just being on Wall Street. There's a lot of different ways that I can go to really cultivate and grow my talent. And so that's what was the spark that really what made me want to go back to school and come out in a different career trajectory.
Yeah, that's a big shift. That's a big deal. And you had an internship at GE, I see.
I did. And so here's the thing about trying to land with career, at least for me, right? So some people know that they want to be a doctor when they're 3, and that's their road, and they don't deviate from that. But for me, there was almost like this falling into place in terms of my purpose, my mission, where I felt like I could make the biggest impact in the world. And so interning at GE, an awesome experience. I met a lot of great people. But what was really also clear to me was this wasn't what I wanted to do, right? And there were certain components that I really enjoyed, but it wasn't necessarily about the mechanics of HR. And actually, with my first week at business school, I met some of the recruiters from an organization called Gallup, and they actually pursued me my entire MBA career, even though I didn't intern with them. So I ended up interning at GE, having a great experience, but Gallup was always still in the back of my mind. And I ultimately decided on Gallup coming out of business school because I felt like I could have a bigger impact on the world. Most people know Gallup as being a polling organization, but they also have a whole behavioral economics and human behavior consulting practice. And that's ultimately where I ended up coming out of business school.
Awesome. And for the folks that are around you in your life at the time, to see the shift from going from Wall Street to, human development, was everybody saying, well, this just totally makes sense. This is who you are. Or did you get any pushback from anyone?
I definitely got pushback from a lot of people. I remember, and my dad, I love him so much, but I remember him telling me, you need to park your licenses somewhere because, to become a financial advisor, I had to take a lot of tests and
Yeah.
get licensed and all of these things, and poured my heart and soul into all of it. And I just was ready to walk away from it. And he was like, well, if you don't, and it was him and some other folks as well, like friends and people saying, well, if you don't park your license, or if you don't stay in your job, at least work part-time, go to school part-time, or park your licenses somewhere. There were a lot of naysayers. And then even when I got to business school, because I wanted to focus in more of that human capital, just that lens, there was a lot of pushback around like, why are you getting your MBA? Like, that's not serious. Or so there was a lot of pushback. And so I just held steadfast because there was something about the human being that I just love. I love developing people to their highest potential in any capacity. And so I knew that there was something in me that needed to be ignited, and was ignited through the whole process of going back to school, for sure.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I'm glad you made the leap. Let's talk about, you've been now with Gallup for going on 9 years. Talk about your work there.
Yeah, for sure. So when I first started off at Gallup, I was a client development consultant. And so it was a hybrid role of doing both business development, so going out and helping partners land the big whale accounts, so Fortune 500 type of work, and going in and doing culture change, and also a bit of maintenance of accounts. And then in 2015, Gallup went through a reorg. I was tapped on my shoulders for a few different roles. And learning and development consulting was something that I never necessarily considered, but a few of my friends and colleagues saw my passion around human being development and some of the different products and services that Gallup offers, such as Clifton Strengths, that many people around the world have taken. And I ultimately chose learning and development consulting because it scared me the most. And so, for about 9 years, I have been around the world coaching, teaching, delivering keynotes, giving executive presentations for a variety of clients, all different industries, K-12 school districts, university space, a lot of C-suite executive work. And it has been invaluable, the experience of being able to go toe to toe with some of the world's most senior leaders. And at the same time, sometimes I do work where I'm coaching 17 and 18-year-olds just coming out of college. So it's given me a wide range of experience. And it's so funny, as human beings, we're often giving all of these labels, but in doing this work, you get to see that there's also a oneness in humanity in terms of our wants, in terms of our desires, in terms of our needs, et cetera. And so it's inspiring. It's it's all of the emotions, especially when I first started, because I didn't really know what I was doing and getting thrown into the fire. But it was a really rewarding experience.
Awesome. I love it. Yes, I definitely, I think a lot of folks, like you said, associate Gallup with polling, but also with the Clifton Strengths tool that I'm sure many folks have taken. I know I have taken several points in my career. Just an incredible amount of insight, I know, for myself and other folks who have utilized that assessment.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing. And I'm a subject matter expert in using it, and I definitely bring that assessment in for all aspects of coaching. I think it's phenomenal. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about sales.
Yeah.
Earlier in your career, you stepped into a sales role and spent, a good portion of the first part of your career in sales. And we say that word and use it very broadly, right? So talk about some of the things you're doing, Jessica. Maybe can we call it your side hustle?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So
Mhm,
empowered for sales. What
mhm.
what what type of work are you doing?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of different components to it. So there is the entrepreneurial side, and I just love the space of entrepreneurship. My mom is a serial entrepreneur and an avid entrepreneur. And so I grew up with that my whole life, just kind of seeing her passion around it. But then also, when I think about this empowered for sales business, it's about the entrepreneurs who are really struggling with sales. They're struggling to kind of figure out, how do I stand out in the marketplace? And they also worry if they'll ever reach that six-figure mark in their business. And I really help people to think about how they can strategically add to their business, scale their services, and also have that unwavering faith and also belief in the value of what they're bringing to the table, so they get more of their ideal clients. And sometimes with sales, it has a negative connotation. Sometimes a lot of people go to the used car salesman, but when sales is done in a way where you're putting the impact first, you can't really go wrong with it. So I help people find their agency within any situation or circumstance on that entrepreneurial journey, which it is a monumental one, right? It's a monumental one, and it tests all of the limits within oneself.
Well,
And
it's
then
so
oh yeah, sorry,
sorry.
go
No,
ahead,
no, no. I
Felina.
just I
Hmm.
just want to pause on that for a second because I mean you're absolutely right when you and I want to get into your mother and some of the businesses she had too. I'm curious about this, but like yourself, I've seen so many entrepreneurs over the years, and it always seems to be the biggest block, not for everybody, but for many entrepreneurs, because they start their law practice because they love law, or they start their CPA practice because they want to help people. They don't think about the fact that, to your point earlier, we're always selling in some way, shape, or form.
Totally, totally. And even, you know, making the shift from representing an organization to now representing yourself, we all have to take the stairs. Like
Yes.
there's not
Yes.
there's not an elevator, and you have to understand, how do I actually monetize the value of the services that I'm providing? And so it's a beautiful journey, and one that can sometimes feel lonely. Sometimes you lose your confidence, or it's an emotional roller coaster. So I love people helping them find the anchor
Mm.
within their empowerment, their confidence, and really also leaning into their unique talents,
Mhm.
right? Because we all have, I call them neurological advantages or talents. And when you can tap into those, you can make these quantum leaps, because you're not selling by a playbook. You're putting down the playbook and stepping into more of who you are. And that's what, turns heads, makes people pay attention, allows for people to lean into your services.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And again, entrepreneurs kind of sometimes will have this block around sales. I sometimes don't even call it sales, right? Because
Mhm.
for some reason
Mhm.
that seems to release just like you did early in your career. And I'm sure you still do today. It's relationship building, it's connecting with people, right?
For sure. And
Yeah.
its impact. So, because if you really if you have your product or service is going to change the way that that person shows up, or allows for them to show up better than they ever could before, like, you have these invaluable things, and if we can focus on the impact, then the word sales gets changed for sure.
Absolutely. Let's
Mhm.
talk about your mom for a minute. You said she was
Yeah,
a serial entrepreneur. What types of businesses did she have
totally.
or has? Currently
Yeah,
has, probably.
and she definitely is still plugging away with it. So I remember when I was younger, my mom is actually a mathematician and a statistician, and so her whole life when she was a little girl, she started tutoring people. So she had a tutoring business when she was very young. She would tutor like everyone in the neighborhood. She actually grew up in Southern California. She's from LA. And then when I was younger, she had a Kumon Math and Reading Center, which is like a franchise,
Yeah.
right? So I remember her having that when I was in high school. And she's just a brilliant person, and she grew that franchise. And her students still come back to her to this day to talk about the changes and the impact that going through that Kumon system meant for them. So I remember that vividly as a child. And since then, my mom has gotten more into MLM type of work. So it's again, relationships, leadership development, and more of that product model. But the Kumon is the one that stands out to me the most, I would say, out of all of her different endeavors. And then there was another stint where she was trying to build her own school. That lasted for a little bit too. So she's just
pioneering for
yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
That is awesome. So Jessica, talk about the types of, I know you work with entrepreneurs. What other folks do you help and work with in your brand Empowered for Sales?
Yeah, for sure. So I also work with executives or people that are aspiring to be in the executive space or C-suite space. And what is so interesting about doing that work is that it often will overlap with some of the entrepreneurial work as well, because there's also struggling with confidence or showing up in a boardroom and being able to have your words together, being able to embody the executive that you want to become even well before you become that executive, navigating relationships within the corporate space. I help managers to be better managers and have a more effective conversations with their teams. And so sometimes these are founders, but the founders that have a team. So how can we not only empower ourselves, but also empower the team? So I've done a lot of that work as well as any type of culture change, any times that you're trying to perfect the culture. So sometimes I also help founders that have gotten into a dispute with one another to kind of mediate, right, and bring things back to a place of calm and forward momentum. So it runs the gamut on the type of work that I'll do in my business. I also do some consulting work as well, where I'm hired to come in and do some strategic type of work or some whiteboarding type of work. So because of my consulting experience, I can almost be a bit of a chameleon.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
What do you need? I can do it.
Exactly. So, but the bulk of my work is really coaching, and then doing more group coaching type of work. And also I can do some facilitating and speaking as well.
Awesome. I love it. What are some of the things you're working on, Jessica, this year related to your business?
Yeah, great question. So I am co-authoring a book that's going to be coming out around Mother's Day. I've done a lot of speaking within my career, and I haven't talked a whole lot about the speaking piece, but the book is going to be on engaging speakers and voices of impact. So telling the stories of impact around speaking, and that's going to be coming out around Mother's Day. It's my first kind of dipping my toe into the ocean of possibilities with writing.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So, yeah, I'm super excited about that. And then the other pieces that I'm working on is just growing the business and starting the group coaching aspect. So doing a lot of one-to-one, but I think there's a lot of power when you can get people together in small groups to talk about wins, opportunities, best practice share. So I'm going to be looking to start a group coaching part of my practice this year as well.
Wonderful. Awesome. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, Jessica, reach out, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, awesome. Well, I welcome anyone that wants to reach out, empoweredforsales.com. And if you want to send me an email, jessica@empoweredforsales.com. Either way is fine. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Jessica. I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
This is so fun. Thank you again for having me on, Felina.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.